When Josh Spencer was discovered bringing leftover food home to nurse his ailing son, he worked as a cleaner at a 5-star restaurant in New York. The chef humiliated the cleaner in front of everyone and threatened to dismiss him when he realized what had transpired. But after only 2 weeks, as he finished cleaning the last dish and set it on the table, everyone there started working for him. He was worn out from balancing so many responsibilities. After such a hard day, Josh had a lot more work to do that day because the restaurant was celebrating. Even though there were not as many dirty dishes as usual, but it wasn't just this that made him perspire from working so hard. He had also spent practically the entire day cleaning the restaurant's filthy floor after work, which took up most of his day. Just as Josh was ready to go out, he saw the customers had brought back a tray of dishes. The meal appeared to be untouched, fresh, and delicious despite being undamaged. Josh considered it for a moment before deciding to bring the dinner home. I suppose it would not harm anyone if I consumed part of the food. It is paid for and I doubt anyone else would notice. Josh tried to comfort himself with a whispered remark. Having only been employed at the restaurant for a few months, he was still getting used to food that had not been touched being brought back to the kitchen. Josh could not figure out why the customers would not eat what looked like a delicious order that was, however, practically daily. Josh chose to accept that this was none of his business and disregarded such circumstances, focusing only on cleaning and washing the dishes that were building up in the sink. In addition, the chef, Mr. Edwards, did not enjoy it when someone got in his way. Mr. Edwards was a strong, intimidating man who exercised brutality and an iron grip on the kitchen. He was responsible for buying the ingredients listed on the menu in order to create the main courses. Josh's shift ended, so he carefully put the untouched dish in a bag to take home. The inadvertent thief was unaware that he was stealing or violating any laws. After all, Josh's choice to take the meal home did not matter because it would have ended up in the trash anyway. But as it happened, he was incredibly wrong. Josh left the restaurant, saying farewell to a co-worker, and took the train home, hoping that the food would not become too cold before he arrived. Josh had 2 kids at home who were surely starving by this time of night. There were good reasons why the single father took the meal. The first female firefighter to graduate from the city's fire station was Josh's wife. Her father, a respected senior fireman, inspired her to gain the respect of her superiors in a male-dominated field. The woman passed away years before expected, during the most trying mission of her life. Such to the family's dismay, residents of the city were shocked when the business gallery fire spread so swiftly that it brought down 2 buildings. When word got out that the gallery was on fire, Rose Clark was one of the first people to appear at the fire station in an effort to save as many lives as possible. And the only reason the number of victims was kept so low was due to her bold and resolute efforts. Sadly, Rose lost her life during her final attempt to climb the building stairs and found herself stranded on a burning floor, abandoning her spouse Josh and their 2 kids. Grieving for his widowhood during the burial and the months that followed, Josh felt like he was stuck in a nightmare. Due to the death of their mother, he was left to care for the children alone. Josh needed to remain hopeful and strong for his kids, but as soon as they went to sleep, he started to think negative things. With all his kids depending on him, it took him about a year to get used to the new normal and try to gradually get his life back on track. Watson and Frank got along well and would take care of each other if needed because their ages were 2 years apart. Because the kids were 8 and 10, Josh could leave them alone at home when he had to go to work. The neighbors looked after the kids on Sundays, but Josh was uncomfortable approaching them for assistance on a regular basis. In an effort to provide for his family, Josh worked from job to job, each looking for a better opportunity. He was always a self-aware and driven young man, the kind of young guy that everyone looked forward to and thought would have a great future, despite his modest beginnings. Josh's high school grades and dedication earned him a scholarship to study administration at one of the biggest universities in the nation. This young man was ecstatic, and it seemed like the beginning of a new chapter in his career. However, after Watson, his first child, was born, everything fell apart. Coming from a low-income household and having no one to confide in, or ask for assistance. Josh had no choice but to leave college early and start working to help pay for the newborn's costs. His wife's ambitions to become a fireman was only a pipe dream at the moment. Josh managed to land a job as a doorman, gas station attendant and pizza delivery man, but even after he had recovered from his loss for a year, every job had its disadvantages. Either the working conditions were unpleasant or the salary was too low, and luck shined on Josh when he had just given up on landing a job that would suit him. He discovered a position that paid marginally more than his previous one, and after a meeting with the senior businessman, who was the restaurant's director, the young man was recruited right away. Josh was surprised to find that cleaning up after the restaurant was not as tough as it originally seemed. The remainder of the cleaning, meanwhile, was a nightmare. He never realized that a place that size needed to have its floors cleaned every day, except for the staff restroom, which remained unclean no matter what he did. Josh was so excited to see the light coming from the window of his house that his heart was racing. "My boys, you are still awake," he grinned. As he opened the door, Frank and Watson hurried to give him a hug and tell him about their day. "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, Frank's got chest troubles again," Watson added, blushing with shame. "He asked me not to tell you anything, but he was crying uncontrollably." Josh pursed his lips and cast a worried glance towards his oldest son. Frank had pain for several years due to a cardiac problem. A year prior, he found out a routine exam that his son had acquired a serious problem. The youngest needed heart surgery. The cardiologist informed Josh after taking a look at him, "Look, Josh, I'm aware of your tale. Since everyone in the room is aware of what transpired with your wife, I must advise you that this course of treatment is highly costly. You have to get ready for it." The doctor handed him a piece of paper with the address of the hospital that could do the procedure and stated, "The surgery should cost a little over $12,000, plus post-op medicine." Josh knew, as he left the doctor's office, that he had to locate the money as quickly as possible to have Frank's surgery. The life of his firstborn was in risk, after all. Josh discovered, after performing the math at home, that he would need to save for the surgery for 2 years and practice strict money management. If he could bring home meals from the restaurant more often, then the waiting period could be much shorter than the man thought. It was not such an absurd sum, but the widowing father was not sure how much longer he could take the daily suffering that Frank was in. After setting the restaurant plates for his kids to eat, Josh went to the bathroom for a much-needed shower. As expected, there will be cleaning and dirty dishes to deal with the next day. But when Josh showed up at the restaurant the following day, Chef Edwards was waiting for him and had an awkward talk with him in front of all the other staff members. "I am aware that yesterday night you took the leftovers home. Do you think it is dumb of me that you were able to so quickly steal the food I made? Disgrace to you, lazy person. My recipes do not work well for a cleaner." Chef Edwards threw empty plates on the floor and told Josh to clean up the mess, saying, "You better start understanding your position here, because the next time you will be on the street without a second thought." Josh struggled mightily to remain silent and to not reply to the taunts. He was not the kind to back down from a battle, but he was frightened of losing his job, so there was nothing he could do. He would not be able to afford his son's surgery, much less his rent if he was fired. Josh felt like he had to take the chance of taking extra food home, so he started to be more careful. Every day, he hoped the customers would return some items, so he could take them home to feed his children. Again, they sent dishes back to the kitchen every day, which made Josh happy for about a month, until the new restaurant director asked a cleaner to come to her office. Olivia Thompson was a 35-year-old businesswoman who always made sure to be in charge of everything. She knew how much each dollar was worth, and had been dedicated to her business since she took it over. Olivia chose to put up security cameras in the restaurant on a day when it was not open, so she could figure out why it was losing so much money. She did not tell any of her workers for reasons that were clear. As soon as Olivia saw the scared cleaner in her office, she began to ask questions. "Mr. Josh, I have one question for you. When you left the restaurant last night, what did you have with you? Do not forget that everything is caught on video, so you cannot lie." Josh was scared and felt helpless. After hearing what the restaurant owner said, he finally got himself together and mumbled, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I had some extra food from the kitchen in my bag. It was food that customers had brought back to the kitchen and was supposed to be thrown away." Olivia looked at the young man, sighed, and asked, "Did you feed them to your dog or a beggar?" Her face went from anger to sympathy. Josh's eyes were filled with tears as he told the restaurant owner the truth. Even though she was not easily moved, the businesswoman could not understand why someone in the 21st century would have to feed their kids food from a restaurant. But what she found out later turned her whole life on its head. "To be honest, I did not have a choice. My wife was a firefighter who died at the scene of the big city fire, and my oldest son has a heart condition. He needs surgery, so I save as much money as I can," the young man said as he wiped his eyes. Olivia looked surprised at the young man, and then asked a strange question. "You said your wife was a fireman who died in a fire in the city. Is that true? Is that right?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma'am. Her name was Rose Clark, and she was the first firefighter woman to get to the gallery that day." Olivia sighed and sat back in her chair, rubbing her eyes with her fingers. Josh had an anxiety attack because her face showed real worry. When the businesswoman finally got herself together, she told Josh that it all started when her mother died after a long battle with cancer a few years ago. Olivia's father did not handle the loss very well. As a result, his health and movement got worse, and he had to be put in a wheelchair and depends on someone at all times. Olivia then hired a caretaker for her father, and in order to carry on his business tradition, she took over his restaurants. She loved her father and thought that losing him would be the worst thing that could happen to her. Because of this, she always talked to him before making any choices and thought of him as her guide. On August 13th, Olivia's heart came close to stopping. This is because her father was getting care at a clinic in the same shopping mall that caught on fire, and he was supposed to have an appointment at the time of the fire. The old man's caretaker died when she got stuck in the rubble, but Olivia's father was luckily saved. On that day, the old man would not stop saying that an angel had saved him. He kept saying that a fireman threw himself on a trampoline a few meters below to save him from the fire. Everything happened so quickly that he did not have time to ask her name before she ran out into the flames to help others. As she stood next to the young widow, Olivia did not know if the woman who had saved her father was Josh's wife, but it did not matter. She felt she had to help his sick son to show her gratitude to the woman who died saving lives. The businesswoman told Josh that she would be willing to help him by shaking his hand. At the same time, Olivia saw a chance to gain someone's trust and use it to her advantage. She said she did not trust Chef Edwards and asked Josh to keep an eye on him and tell her if he did anything strange. The man agreed. He is always very smart. After all, things between him and Chef Edwards had gotten much worse. Josh listened in on the chef's phone calls for 2 weeks and even followed him when he went to the back of the restaurant to get supplies. He quickly put everything together and found out what was going on. The chef bought all the ingredients and spices from a friend who charged too much. He would buy things that were not as good or were even more expensive this way, taking all the money for himself. People sent back a lot more food than normal because the food was not as good as it would be at a 5-star restaurant. Olivia and her lawyers looked into Josh's information and found out that it was true. Chef Edwards was fired and sued right away, but Olivia had also heard Josh's ideas for saving money and making the service better, which he had had since he started working there, but had not been able to talk to anyone anymore. The same week, Olivia called one of the best heart doctors in town. She sent the whole cost of the surgery at once and asked that the case be given top priority. Then she called Josh to tell him what was going on. "Hey man, be happy. Your son will live long enough to see the bright future that his father had planned for him. Tell him that as long as you go back to college, you will be in charge of this room that you cleaned for months. Now I am curious to see if people will still bring back dishes that are still in good shape." Josh did not know whether to laugh or cry, and all he had to do was thank God that he had met that woman, and finally got off the phone and hugged his kids while crying. Even the doctors were surprised by how quickly the boy got better after surgery, Olivia and Josh kept in touch after their work talks, which gave Josh a chance to introduce Olivia to his kids. Then, Olivia's father wanted to meet the new restaurant manager. When he heard that he had doubled the company's profits in just a few months, as they walked through the park, they met and talked. The former cleaner then took a picture of his late wife out of his pocket and showed it to the older man. The old man, who could not move and has tears in his eyes, just says, my angel,